Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. Today I'm going to be doing the review for the 1981 original Halloween 2 in this Scream Factory 4K Ultra HD. I think it's 2 discs. No, it has 3. It has 3 on it. 3 disc set, but it's not for the 3 disc set. I can't talk. It's just for the original Halloween 2. It's a 1981 film, and of course by the time that I saw this film, I had seen the original Halloween a billion times. I rented this, the original Halloween 2, back probably about 2006, 2005. I remember seeing it right at the time of either very late elementary school, very early middle school, somewhere in there, and I always really liked it a lot. There for a while it was my favorite Halloween. I think it's a really good, strong movie. This one's not directed by John Carpenter. He actually just wrote it this time around. And we'll get to that when I talk about the writing, but Rick Rosenthal, who also directed Halloween Resurrection much later on down the years, directed this movie, and I think he does it competently so. Being 1981, 3 years after the 1978 original classic, horror had blown up. The 80s was the horror decade, in my opinion, just like the recent couple of years have been the Marvel decade, the MCU decade, or the superhero decade. This old movie came out around the time where we had already had so many slashers coming out. Like every weekend, 2 and 3 slashers were coming out straight to theaters, and you had 2 and 3 going straight to video with the VHS existing and whatever. I assume it hit by 1981 was when VHS existed. I could be sure. I'm not going to care enough to go look it up, but you can do that if you'd like, and let me know down in the comments section down below. But I'm fairly certain, at least by 1982, VHS had hit. Anyway, we had a lot of movies coming out by this time because of the original Halloween. So Halloween 2 not only has the pressure of being as good as the original movie, and all the people like John Carpenter, Rick Rosenthal, all those people, even down to Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasence, had the push to try to make something just as good as the original movie, but they also had the pressure of competition now. Horror was big in the 70s. But when 78's Halloween came out, it was so special, and they had to make something unique and special for this movie. And as far as I know, being a big Halloween fan, being a big horror movie fan, and a big slasher fan, I'm almost certain there was no horror movie at that time, or slasher film at that time, that had taken place in a hospital. And pretty much all this movie does, taking place immediately after the original Halloween ended with a very small, very short recap. They pick up almost immediately after the end of Halloween 2, or Halloween 1, and have Laurie getting transported from the Doyle house or whatever all the way over to the hospital, and Michael is not dead yet. Of course, he disappeared at the end of the first movie. That's kind of a spoiler for you folks who haven't seen it yet, but he's gone. And Loomis can't find him, Laurie can't find him. Loomis goes a little bit off the edge because of this, and gets a little bit more crazy this time around than he was in the first film. In the first film, he was suspicious of Michael. But now he's like scared. He's like, this guy might not actually be human. Like, I know I said that in the first movie, but holy shit. He's way scarier than he is in the first film. Way more superstitious, excuse me. It's very late, I'm very tired, can't sleep, as I said in my previous review. He's scared to death. And so everybody's trying to track down Michael while Laurie is in the hospital trying to recover. Now I know Jamie Lee Curtis complained, playing Laurie this time around. She complained about most of the script involving her being in the hospital for most of the movie. And then recently in Halloween Kills last year, she did the exact same thing all over again. Thank you, Jamie. You've contributed nothing, and it's a great example of why I'm not a fan of Jamie Lee Curtis that much. She's a fine actress, don't get me wrong, I love her in Freaky Friday, but in these movies she's fine. She's fine, and I don't have any complaints. I think she does her best with what she's given. The scripts for these movies are not very great. Most of the genius of the original movie comes from the music and the directing, which is all John Carpenter, a little bit of Deborah Hill. But a lot of the on-screen stuff, the writing of the characters, it's not very strong, even though that's also Deborah Hill and John Carpenter. This movie, I think, is pretty much just John Carpenter. Deborah Hill might be involved a little bit more. I don't know, maybe a little less. I don't know. The writing is, to me, a slight bit better than in the first movie, but it's not as... It's an atmospheric movie. It's not as atmospheric and well done as the first movie, but it's still effective. It's still fun. It's scary. It's creepy. There are moments in this that are very much more, after so many horror films, slasher films had come out by the time between this movie and the previous one, this film had to up its game. It becomes a lot bloodier, a lot more gory kills are happening here. One of my biggest complaints, by the way, is the look of Michael Myers. They claim it's the same mask. Deborah Hill kept it, put it underneath her pillow, from what I hear. She was a heavy smoker. The mask looks different. I have a feeling that the cigarette smoke had something to do with that. He looks different in the movie. By the way, we have Dick Warlock, who I love to death. Seems like a very sweet man, playing Michael Myers this time around instead of Nick Castle. Excuse me. And he's good. He's good. I like him. But the look of him, mainly the mask, looks weird to me. It seems like the neck is more like a human, regular old Shatner mask skin tone and not like the white creepiness we know. Maybe it's something to do with the lighting, I'm not really sure, but Michael looks different. It's not just the actor himself, Dick Warlock, playing him this time. And I've said that forever. That's the one thing I really have to complain about with this movie. It's a flawed movie, just like the original is flawed, kind of in different ways, but fairly similar sometimes too. But Michael doesn't look as good as he did in the previous film, and I think the previous film with Nick Castle is the best looking Michael ever. And I think it always will be, for that matter. Anyway, one of my other complaints I have is that Michael Myers doesn't use a butcher knife in this movie much, or at all. He just kind of uses a scalpel. He does some other things. He does some really horrific other things, one involving a needle. Oh my god, that looked like it would hurt. We didn't even see it happen on screen. It was just the aftermath that really got to me. But he uses a scalpel as a knife in this movie a lot. Why would you change that? Why would Carpenter choose to do that? It was just a weird choice, as well as some other bad choices. Of course, I think the casting of the hospital staff, it's also on third shift, so it's very, very few people. Not really any patients, just kind of management. This one lady who I really like. Two ladies that are nurses, I really like them. And then two ambulance drivers, one who becomes infatuated with Laurie Strode, he's one of the ones who pick her up. The other guy is an absolute scumbag, and he's awful, and he's a good actor, don't get me wrong, but I can't stand him. I hate his guts throughout the entire film. But I think everybody's well cast. Jamie Lee Curtis is good here for the moment she's in it, which is like half the movie, you know? And let's see, who else? Donald Pleasance, like I said, comes back. He's just as good. Sometimes better. Sometimes better in this film than he was in the previous film. I think everybody is well cast for this movie. It feels like a Deborah Hill and John Carpenter kind of duo team-up for trying to cast who they wanted for this movie. And Rick Rosenthal's directing feels like Carpenter's movie a lot of the time. It just feels like Halloween. It manages to keep that flavor, as I heard somebody describe it on IMDb earlier when I was reading through some of the reviews on these movies. It keeps that flavor of that original Halloween movie, but upping the slasher elements because of the way the subgenre and the way the horror genre in general had gone by this time, and the way mainstream audiences craved more blood in movies. It's very gory. There's pretty much no gore in the original movie at all. There's some brutal kills, things we see on screen, but there's really no blood in that movie. This one, however, it has some. Quite a bit. Whereas the original film has less blood than Psycho, the old original Alfred Hitchcock movie, this one has more than Psycho. And in a good way. I like all that about it. It's one of the reasons why back in the day, like I said, I kind of considered it my favorite there for a while. One of the big changes here is that the practical effects we use for the movie, mainly involving kills and aftermath of kills that we find throughout the film in the hospital and in that setting, which is really ominous, by the way. I really like the atmosphere of a hospital. It creeps me out. I love it in Silent Hill, and I love it here. The aftermath of kills is really effective, you know, and those practical effects for that, they work. I wanted to bring that up while I talk about some effects. Anyway, the writing, like I said, is a little bit right on par, but there's a really awful twist that ruined Halloween as a franchise from this movie onward. It really did, and I say that, and you probably know exactly the one I'm talking about. It's the one the newer films had to completely ignore. It ruined the franchise. It really did. Because after this movie, mainly after Part 3, because it picks up in 4, these movies are haunted by a terrible twist that John Carpenter himself hates, that he wrote in the script, pretty much wrote the script while he was drunk, by the way. That twist towards the end of this movie, it kind of taints this movie. And it kind of even goes back and taints the first movie too. Where it should be, I'm not going to tell you too much, in case you guys don't know the twist. I'm sure you do. Even people who aren't fans of Halloween know the twist of this franchise from this movie. A lot of people forget it's in this movie. A lot of people like my mom, who haven't seen Halloween 2 in forever, thought it was announced in the first movie. It's not. The first movie's better than this for that particular reason. It has its flaws, but it doesn't have stupid plot twists like this one has. But for the most part, I think the film is very watchable. I think it's very fun, very eerie. Again, that atmosphere of the hospital, of the music, which we'll get to in a moment, it really lingers. I think it all works very well. It feels like a third shift hospital. If you've ever visited a relative or you've been in a hospital at nighttime, to be in one or to visit somebody, like I said, that feel is in this. It's eerie. It's very, very eerie. I like it a lot. I think it really makes this film effective, and I think Rob Zombie did a great job of even recreating that feeling in Halloween 2 when he did that years ago, in 2009 as a matter of fact. It's one of my favorites of the series, but we'll talk about that later on too. I haven't even gotten around to watching that yet. Let's see, what else is there to talk about on my list here? The music. Alright, so for a long time, the music in this film was my favorite soundtrack of Halloween. I have come to the point, though, I think that the original is the rendition of all of those songs, all of the themes that you hear from that original movie. I think it's the best version you've ever heard in the entire series. Even though I have other ones I like Halloween 6, I think has some really good music in it. This one went in way more of a synthwave type of feel. It's very much more of a synth version, and sometimes that's really good for this movie. It's very tension-filled, and sometimes it's a little bit too cheesy. Some moments it kind of ruins the movie a little bit. And I tried to think while I watched it this time around what it would have sounded like if we had the original John Carpenter music from the original movie, the exact same renditions played in this movie. It probably would have improved this even more. If you had that and you had taken out the twist towards the end of this movie, this one might be better than the previous movie. It might be the best of all time. I don't know. Just my opinion. Halloween 2 is very underrated. I think it's a forgotten sequel in the franchise, in my personal opinion. A lot of people seem to like Halloween 4 more than they like this, and I can kind of understand that. It feels more like the original in a lot of ways. It's more back to basics. But this one, to me, feels a lot more like Halloween 1 because of John Carpenter's involvement so much in this movie. It really maintains the feel and, again, the flavor of that original film. And if you love that original movie, I would be shocked why you don't like this one, even though it has that really bad twist that tainted Halloween as a franchise for many decades, as we talked about. But that's just my personal opinion. I really like Halloween 2. It's not a perfect movie, like I said, but it has a lot of strengths to it. Some really good stuff, and some things that are a little wish-washy, like that music that is, for the most part, really good. And then it kind of craps the bed sometimes. I'm sorry, it does. There's some great tension in here, some great scares in here, some really good jump scares in here, some really good moments of Michael being in the background, in the dark, in certain corners and alleyways that you would never expect. He's utilized brilliantly here, and I think Dick Warlock, like I said, played him very well. Just the look of him affects me. A lot of this stuff, it didn't carry over well, in my opinion, because of the circumstances, even though this one probably had a higher budget than the original movie. I don't know how much higher, but I just know it probably did because of the success of that first movie. Anyway, Halloween 2, 1981. What do you guys think about this original movie? Do you love it? Do you hate it? I would love to hear all your thoughts in the comments down below. And if I had to rate this movie on a 5-star basis, I'm going to rate it about the same thing I gave the first movie, a 4 out of 5 stars, but for different reasons. Like I said, this one has its flaws, but it's still effective. It's still scary. In some ways, I think it's scarier than the first film, in just some certain moments. There are some things that are done so well as a throwback to that first movie. If these were the only two we ever got, and we never got anything else of Michael Myers, the way it was intended originally, if that had been the case, excuse me, I lisped because I bit my tongue. If that had been the case, I would have been completely fine with it. I think both would be held in very, very high regard for all of time, really. But that's not what happened, was it? We got one more movie after this, and then we jumped back to Michael Myers again. Anyway, Halloween 2. Love it a lot. Really good flick. 4 out of 5 stars for me. What are your thoughts on the film? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about it. And by the way, this 4K Ultra HD Scream Factory release or whatever, really, really good version. 3-disc set. A lot of bonus features, a lot of commentaries. If you're into all that stuff the way I am for films that I grew up on and films I love a lot, this is a really good set. I love thinking back to the weekend that I rented this movie for the first time and watched it. It was so fun to see a sequel that I hadn't really seen much of. I mainly grew up on Halloween 1, but I saw 4 a couple of times too. This one I saw quite a few times, and it surprised me by how much I liked this. You know, it was so effective, and it's still effective. Very, very, very well-aged movie. Anyway, in some ways, by the way, I think it aged a little bit better than Halloween 1 did. It's a lot less slow. Even though the first film's doing it for a reason, this one's a lot less slow. But its flaws still beat it down a little bit, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well. 4 out of 5 stars for Halloween 2. What do you think about it? Put your thoughts and comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say once again. Thank you guys for watching. God bless you all. And I forgot to say in my previous review, even though I kind of said it at the beginning but not at the end because I didn't know how to end that review, I'll say it here. Even though I already said God bless you guys. Happy Halloween. It's coming very soon here in 2022. Anyway, thank you guys. God bless you again. Happy Halloween again, and goodbye.